April 24th, 1945. Würzburg, Germany. The dust tasted like ash and crushed stone. I stood in what used to be our kitchen, holding a wooden spoon over a pot of water boiling with 3 potatoes. The ceiling was gone. The April sky pressed down through the exposed beams, gray and indifferent. Mutti, I'm hungry. My daughter's voice. 6 years old. I didn't turn around. If you're watching this because you want to understand what really happened in those final days, not the version in textbooks, but what it felt like to breathe that air, to hear those sounds, then subscribe now. Hit that like button. And comment below. What would you do if everything you'd been told turned out to be a lie? I'll respond to every single one. May 15th, 1945. Würzburg, Germany. The smell of DDT powder made me gag. An American medical officer dusted it over Elsa's hair, checking for lice. She stood perfectly still, eyes closed, face scrunched up. Klaus had already been processed. He was outside playing with a wooden truck Private Cooper had found somewhere. All clear, the medical officer said in German. Next, I stepped forward. The powder fell like snow, acrid and chemical. The officer worked methodically, professionally, her gloved hands moving through my hair with practiced efficiency. She was maybe 25, younger than me. You're doing well, ma'am, she said. Your children are healthy. That's not common. The medicine you gave us helped. But you kept them alive before we got here. That's on you, she finished, pulled off her gloves, made a notation on her clipboard. Behind her, a line of German civilians stretched out the door of the makeshift clinic. Old women, children. A few men with missing limbs and haunted eyes. Ma'am, the medical officer was looking at me with concern. Are you all right? I realized I was crying again. I seemed to do that constantly now. Tears at odd moments, watching Klaus eat breakfast, hearing Elsa sing, seeing American soldiers distribute candy to children in the square. I'm fine, I said. She didn't believe me. We have someone you can talk to, a psychiatrist. He's helped a lot of people who are... I'm fine, I repeated, and fled before she could say anything else. Outside the sun was too bright. The world was too loud. Everything felt wrong. Not dangerous wrong, but off, like a picture frame hanging crooked that you can't stop noticing. Elsa took my hand. Mutti, can we go to the food line? Yes. Yes, of course. We walked through streets that were slowly being cleared. German prisoners of war worked alongside American engineers, moving rubble, shoring up damaged buildings, marking which structures were too dangerous to enter. The POWs wore their Wehrmacht uniforms with the insignia torn off. They didn't look like soldiers anymore. They looked like the walking dead. One of them, a boy, maybe 19, made eye contact with me as we passed. His eyes were empty, completely empty, like someone had reached inside and scooped out whatever made him human. I looked away. May 18th, 1945. The Americans set up a cinema in the shell of the old theater. They showed newsreels, educational films, instructions on sanitation and disease prevention. Attendance was mandatory for anyone receiving rations. I didn't want to go. Something about the way the soldiers' faces looked when they talked about it made my stomach clench, but we needed the rations. So I left Klaus and Elsa with Frau Becker, a widow who'd lost her husband at Kursk, and joined the crowd filing into the theater. 300 people, maybe more. We sat on benches salvaged from the rubble. An American officer stood at the front, his face grim. You're going to see something today, he said in careful German. Something we need you to see. Something the world needs to witness. The projector clicked on. The first images were almost mundane. Allied soldiers entering a camp. Barbed wire. Guard towers. Then the camera moved closer. Bodies. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Piled like cordwood. Skeletal figures that barely looked human. Living people who looked like corpses, staring at the camera with eyes that held nothing but suffering. A woman next to me vomited. Others gasped. Some tried to leave, but American soldiers blocked the exits. You will watch, the officer said. His voice was flat, hard, all of it. The film continued. Footage from Dachau, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen. The commentator's voice, American, clinical, precise, described what we were seeing. Gas chambers disguised as showers, crematoria, Medical experiments, mass graves, and through it all, the survivors, living skeletons reaching toward the camera, children with numbers tattooed on their arms, women so emaciated you couldn't tell how old they were. The film showed German civilians being marched through the camps, forced to look, forced to witness. Some of them turned away, some fainted, some tried to claim they didn't know. The camera lingered on their faces, on the horror, on the denial, on the slow, terrible recognition. When the lights came back on, the theater was silent, except for the sound of people crying. The American officer stood at the front, arms crossed. "This is what was done in your name," he said. "This is what your government did while you saluted the flag and sang the songs." A man stood up in the back. Old, probably 70, with a face like weathered leather. "We didn't know," he said. His voice shook. "We didn't know it was this bad. The camps. We knew there were camps, but we thought they were for criminals, for enemies of the state. We didn't know about this." The officer's expression didn't change. "Your ignorance doesn't absolve you. Your compliance enabled this. Every Heil Hitler. Every ration card accepted. Every neighbor denounced. Every time you looked away. You were part of this machine. That's not fair." A woman's voice, angry and desperate. "We were just trying to survive. What were we supposed to do?" "I don't have an answer for that," the officer said quietly. "But I do know this. These people," he gestured at the frozen image on the screen. "They were trying to survive too. And they didn't get rations. They didn't get ice cream for their children. They got this." No one spoke. "You're going to have to live with this knowledge now," he continued. "You're going to have to decide what to do with it. That's on you." He walked out. The soldiers opened the exits. I stumbled into the sunlight and vomited in an alley. May 19th, 1945, morning. I couldn't look at my children. They were playing in the ruins, Klaus making engine noises with his truck, Elsa singing a song she'd learned from the American soldiers, and I couldn't bear to look at them. Because every time I did, I saw those other children. The ones in the film. The ones with numbers on their arms and eyes that held nothing but death. Children who'd been murdered while I fed my children, while I sang them to sleep, while I worried about rations and air raids, and whether Ernst would ever come home. Those children had been dying in agony while I'd believed we were the victims. "Mutti," Elsa was standing in front of me, her face worried. "Are you sick?" "No, sweetheart. I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look like Frau Werner did before they—" She stopped, looked down. I pulled her close, held her too tight. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." But I wondered if that was true, because something inside me had broken in that theater. Something that couldn't be fixed by American rations or kind soldiers or ice cream. May 21st, 1945. I went to the psychiatric officer. I didn't tell anyone. Just left the children with Frau Becker and walked to the clinic. The psychiatrist was a captain. Mid-40s, glasses, the kind of face that looked like it smiled easily. His office was a corner of the school that had somehow survived mostly intact. Walls, ceiling, even a desk. "Mrs. Hoffman?" he said in good German. "Please, sit." I sat, folded my hands in my lap, stared at the floor. "The medical officer mentioned you've been distressed. Is that accurate?" "I saw the film," I said. "Ah." He leaned back. "Many people are having difficulty processing what they saw. That's normal." "Normal?" I looked up at him. "How is any of this normal?" Perhaps normal is the wrong word. Let me rephrase. Your reaction is understandable. You've been exposed to information that contradicts everything you believed about your country, your leaders, your role in the war. That's traumatic. "I didn't know," I said. The words came out desperate, pleading. "I didn't know it was that bad. We knew there were camps, but we were told they were work camps, prisons for enemies of the state. Not that." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Did you believe it?" "What?" "Did you believe what you were told about the camps? Or did you simply accept it because questioning was dangerous?" I opened my mouth, closed it. I stopped. Started again. There were rumors, whispers, things people said late at night after too much schnapps. About trains going east that never came back. About smoke from chimneys that smelled wrong. About soldiers on leave who wouldn't talk about what they'd seen. And what did you do with those rumors? Nothing. The word was ash in my mouth. I did nothing. I told myself they were lies, Allied propaganda, slander designed to weaken our morale. I told myself that our leaders wouldn't, that Germany wouldn't. I couldn't finish. Mrs. Hoffman, the psychiatrist said gently, you weren't wrong to try to survive. You weren't wrong to protect your children. But you're right that doing nothing was a choice. Passivity is a choice. And now you have to live with the consequences of that choice. How? My voice cracked. How do I live with this? One day at a time. One moment at a time. And by deciding what you do next. Next, you can't change the past, but you can choose how you move forward. You can choose what you teach your children. You can choose what kind of person you want to be in a world that's being rebuilt. I looked at him through tears. The Americans, why are you helping us? After what we did, because punishment isn't justice. Because helping you rebuild is how we prevent this from happening again. Because... He paused. Because we recognize that people are complicated. Some Germans were monsters. Some were victims. Most were somewhere in between, trying to survive in a system designed to punish doubt and reward obedience. That doesn't excuse... No, he agreed. It doesn't. But it does explain. An explanation is the first step toward understanding. Understanding is the first step toward change. May 28th, 1945. The days took on a rhythm. Morning, field kitchen for breakfast. Klaus and Elsa ate like they'd never heard of rationing. Afternoon, work detail. The Americans organized teams to clear rubble, salvage materials, plant gardens in the ruins. Evening. The children played while I tried not to think about the film. I failed every time. Private Cooper still brought treats occasionally. Candy, cookies. Once, impossibly, a small teddy bear for Elsa. She named it Liberty, a word she'd learned from the soldiers, and slept with it every night. One afternoon, Cooper found me sorting bricks. He sat down on the rubble beside me. How are you holding up, ma'am? I'm alive, I said. That's not what I asked. I set down the brick I was holding. I saw the film, the one about the camps. His face changed, grew older. Yeah. We all saw what was in those places when we liberated them. There aren't words. Why didn't you punish us? The question burst out before I could stop it. Why are you giving my children candy and ice cream when we let that happen? He was quiet for a long time. Then, my dad fought in the First War, World War I. He was at the Argonne, saw terrible things. When he came home, people wanted to punish Germany, make you pay. The Treaty of Versailles. You know about that. I nodded. My dad said that treaty didn't create peace. It created resentment, humiliation, economic collapse. He said it was like planting seeds for another war, and he was right. Cooper picked up a brick, turned it over in his hands. So this time, we're trying something different. Not revenge. Rebuilding. Because we figure if we help you get back on your feet, if we show you that democracy and freedom actually work, maybe, just maybe, you won't fall for another dictator. You have more faith in us than we deserve, I said bitterly. Maybe. Or maybe we just remember that you're people, and people can change. He stood up, dusted off his uniform. Besides, your kids didn't do anything wrong. They deserve a chance at a normal life. That's not negotiable. He walked away, leaving me sitting in the rubble with tears streaming down my face. June 3rd, 1945. Frau Becker found me in the evening. She looked terrible. Older, somehow. Though only 2 weeks had passed since the film. Margaret, there's something I need to tell you. We sat on the steps of what used to be her house. The sun was setting, turning the ruins gold and pink. My husband, she said. Karl. He didn't die at Kursk. I waited. He was SS. Totenkopfverbände. Death's head units. He worked at Dachau for 2 years before they transferred him east. The world tilted. He told me some of it. Not everything. Just enough that I knew something terrible was happening, and I said nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business, that Karl was just following orders, that if I didn't ask questions I could pretend I didn't know. She looked at me with eyes full of agony. He died at Kursk. Maybe that's justice. Maybe that's mercy. I don't know. But I need you to know that I knew. Not the details, not the full horror, but I knew enough, and I did nothing. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't carry it alone anymore. Because I need someone to know that I'm complicit, that I'm guilty, that every time I take American rations, I'm taking food I don't deserve. I reached out and took her hand. We're all guilty. Some more than others. But all of us who stayed silent, we're all guilty, she sobbed. I held her while she cried. Later, walking home, I realized something. Confession didn't grant absolution, but it was a start. June 10th, 1945. The Americans brought teachers to the school. They started classes for the children. Reading, writing, arithmetic, but also new subjects. Democracy, human rights, the importance of questioning authority. Elsa came home excited. Mutti, we learned about America today. They elect their leaders. The people choose. That's wonderful, sweetheart. And the teacher said that everyone has rights. Even people who are different from you. Even people you don't like. Klaus chimed in. And she said that soldiers are supposed to protect people, not hurt them. Is that true, Mutti? I looked at their eager faces, their innocence, their hope. Yes, I said. That's true. It should have been true for us too. But it wasn't. And they'd learn that eventually. But for now, let them believe in a better world. June 20th, 1945. Private Cooper knocked on our door, the part of the frame that still stood. He looked nervous. Ma'am, I wanted to let you know. My unit is shipping out next week. Going home. Something dropped in my chest. Oh. Yeah. The war's over. Replacements are coming in, and those of us with enough points get to go back. He shuffled his feet. I just wanted to say goodbye to the kids, if that's okay. Of course. Elsa and Klaus were devastated. Klaus cried. Elsa tried to be brave, but her lip trembled. Will you come back? She asked. I don't know, kiddo. Maybe someday. But I'll tell you what. He pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil. This is my address, in Pennsylvania. If you ever want to write me a letter, you can. And I'll write back. Promise. He handed me the paper. I stared at it. You'd want to hear from us? Course I would. You're good people, Mrs. Hoffman. You and your kids. I'd like to know how you're doing. He gave each child a final piece of candy, shook my hand solemnly, and climbed into his Jeep. We watched him drive away. That night, I looked at the address for a long time. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my diary. July 1st, 1945. The Nuremberg trials were being prepared. News filtered through. Goering captured. Hess in custody. The apparatus of the Nazi state being dismantled piece by piece. Justice, they called it. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like watching a building collapse in slow motion while standing in the rubble of what it crushed. But maybe that's what justice was. Not revenge, not satisfaction, but the slow, painful process of naming what happened and holding people accountable. A poster appeared in the square. Democracy requires vigilance. It showed a ballot box and a raised hand. The message was clear. Never again let someone else do your thinking for you. I stared at it for a long time. July 15th, 1945. I started teaching Elsa and Klaus about the war. Not the propaganda version. The truth. There were people who were hurt very badly, I told them. People who were killed because of who they were, because of their religion, or where they came from, or because they disagreed with the government. Why? Klaus asked. Because the leaders we trusted lied to us. And because good people, people like me, didn't stop them. Elsa's face was serious. Are you a bad person, Mutti? The question knocked the air from my lungs. I was a person who made bad choices, who stayed silent when I should have spoken, who believed lies because questioning was scary. But you're not bad now? I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to do better. She thought about this. Then, that's good, Mutti. If only it were that simple. August 6th, 1945. The Americans dropped a bomb on Japan. One bomb. One city. 100,000 dead in an instant. The news hit like a physical blow. After everything. After the camps. After the rubble. After the millions dead. They'd found a way to kill even more efficiently. The psychiatrist found me crying in the clinic. It never ends. I said. The killing never ends. It will, he said. Eventually. But not today. How do you know? Because people like you exist. People who've seen the cost, who've learned the lessons, who'll teach their children differently. That's not enough. No, he agreed. But it's a start. September 1st, 1945. I wrote my first letter to Private Cooper. Dear Private Cooper, I don't know if you remember us. The woman with 2 children in Würzburg. The ones you gave ice cream to. I wanted you to know that we're still here, still alive. Elsa and Klaus ask about you often. They miss you. I wanted to thank you. Not just for the food and medicine and kindness, but for showing me that people can be better than their governments. That humanity exists even in the worst circumstances. I also wanted to tell you something I've never told anyone. When you first arrived, I was ready to kill my children rather than let them meet American soldiers. I believed the propaganda that completely. The fact that you gave them ice cream instead of bullets, that you showed them kindness instead of cruelty, it broke something in me. Or maybe it fixed something. I'm still not sure. I'm trying to be a better person now. A better mother. I'm teaching my children to question. To think. To never let fear turn them into something monstrous. I don't know if that's enough. But it's all I have. Thank you for saving us. Not just our bodies. Our souls. With gratitude, Margaret Hoffman. I sent the letter through the military postal system. I didn't know if he'd receive it. Didn't know if he'd respond. But I'd said what I needed to say. October 15th, 1945. A letter arrived. American stamps. Pennsylvania postmark. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear Mrs. Hoffman, of course I remember you. How could I forget? You and your kids were the reason I kept going on the hard days. Knowing that we were helping people like you made all of it worthwhile. I'm back home now. Living with my parents. Working at my dad's garage. Trying to figure out how to be a normal person again. It's harder than I expected. Your letter meant more to me than you know. Because I've been struggling with what we did over there. The cities we bombed. The people we killed. Trying to figure out if any of it was worth it. Your letter tells me it was. Because you're still there. Your kids are still laughing. And you're teaching them to be better than what came before. That's victory. Not the military kind. The real kind. Please keep writing. Tell me how the kids are doing. Tell me about Würzburg. Tell me about the rebuilding. And please forgive yourself. You were in an impossible situation. You did what you could to protect your children. That's not something to be ashamed of. Your friend, William Cooper. I read it 3 times. Then I showed it to the children. Private Cooper wrote back, Klaus shouted. Can we write him a letter? Elsa asked. Yes, I said. Yes, we can. November 11th, 1945. 6 months since the war ended. Würzburg was still ruins, but now they were organized ruins. Streets cleared. Buildings marked for demolition or repair. Gardens planted in the debris. A new school building under construction. The Americans were still here, but different ones now. The occupying forces. They were more formal, more distant than Cooper and his unit had been, but they still ran the field kitchens, still provided medicine, still taught the democracy classes. Elsa came home from school with a new assignment. Write about what you learned this year. She wrote, I learned that you should always question what you're told. I learned that people from other countries can be nice even if your government says they're bad. I learned that my Moody is trying to be better. I want to be better too. Klaus drew a picture of a soldier giving ice cream to children. I framed both of them. December 24th, 1945. Christmas Eve. We had a tree, a small one, scavenged from the ruins of someone's garden, but a tree nonetheless. The Americans had provided decorations, simple things, paper and string and a few precious glass ornaments. We had food. Real food. Ham. Potatoes with butter. Even a small cake. Klaus and Elsa sat by the tree examining their gifts. A doll for Elsa, rebuilt and repainted by an American engineer. A toy car for Klaus, made from salvaged metal. Books for both of them. English picture books with German translations written in careful handwriting. And in my pocket, another letter from William Cooper. Dear Margaret. He'd started using my first name. Merry Christmas. I hope you and the kids are warm and safe. I've been thinking a lot about guilt lately. about what we owe to the people we've hurt, about forgiveness and redemption. My pastor says that guilt is meant to change us, not destroy us, that recognizing what we did wrong is the first step toward doing right. I think you've taken that step. You've looked at the truth, really looked at it, no matter how much it hurt. You've chosen to teach your children differently, to be honest with them about what happened. That takes courage, real courage, not the kind that wins medals, the kind that rebuilds worlds. Keep going, keep teaching, keep telling the truth. The world needs people like you. Your friend Will. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in my pocket. Mutti? Elsa's voice. Are you crying again? Happy tears this time, sweetheart. Good tears are okay, Klaus pronounced solemnly. We ate our Christmas dinner by candlelight. I told them stories about their father, the good parts, the parts I wanted them to remember. I told them about the Christmases before the war, when the world was different, and I told them the truth, that we'd been part of something terrible, that we'd have to carry that knowledge forever, but that we could choose to be better, to build something new from the ruins. Will it be hard? Elsa asked. Yes, I said. It will be very hard, but we can do it? Yes, we can do it. January 30th, 1946. The Nuremberg trials were in full swing. The radio broadcast portions of the proceedings. I listened sometimes, then had to turn it off when the descriptions of what had been done became too much. The defendants sat in the dock and claimed they were following orders, that they didn't know, that they were victims too. Some of it was true. Some of it was lies. Most of it was both. I understood them. God help me, I understood them. The fear, the rationalization, the desperate need to believe you weren't complicit in something monstrous. But understanding doesn't mean excusing. The psychiatrist, I still saw him monthly, said that was progress. You're learning to hold two truths at once, he explained. That people can be victims and perpetrators simultaneously. That understanding context doesn't eliminate responsibility. That's a difficult cognitive skill. It's exhausting, I said. Yes, but necessary. March 16th, 1946. 1 year after the bombing. We held a memorial service in the square. For the 5,000 who died that night. For all the people Würzburg had lost. The American chaplain gave a sermon about grief and rebuilding. About remembering without being consumed by the past. I stood between my children, holding their hands, and cried for everyone we'd lost. For Ernst, who probably died screaming in a frozen Russian trench. For Frau Werner, hanged for telling the truth. For the 5,000 who burned in a single night. For the millions in the camps. And for the person I used to be, the woman who'd believed the lies, who'd held a loaded rifle and contemplated the unthinkable, who'd put faith in leaders who saw her children as expendable. That woman was gone. I'd killed her the day Private Cooper handed my children ice cream, and I'd realized that everything I believed was a lie. The woman who remained was harder, sadder, but honest, and that would have to be enough. April 24th, 1946. 1 year after the Americans arrived. Private Cooper, Will, sent a package. Inside, photographs. Him with his family in Pennsylvania. His parents standing in front of a house with actual walls and a roof. His sisters grinning and waving at the camera. And a note. So you can see that we're real people too. Just like you. I put the photographs on our makeshift mantelpiece, next to Ernst's picture. Elsa studied them carefully. Will's sisters look nice. They do. Do you think we'll ever meet them? Maybe someday. I'd like that. So would I. The thought surprised me. A year ago, the idea of traveling to America would have been unthinkable. Now it represented possibility. Hope. A future that extended beyond survival. May 8th, 1946. V-Day Saal. 1 year. The city held a celebration. Not of victory. Germans weren't allowed to celebrate military victories anymore. But of survival. Of rebuilding. Of hope. There was food, music, dancing. American soldiers mingled with German civilians. Some people were still angry, still bitter. Others were cautiously optimistic. I sat on the edge of the crowd and watched Elsa and Klaus play with other children. Running, laughing, being children. That's what we'd fought for, I realized. Not territory, not ideology. But this, children playing in the sunshine, bellies full, no fear in their eyes. "Mrs. Hoffman?" I turned. An American officer I didn't recognize. Older, maybe 45, with kind eyes. "Yes? I'm Colonel Harrison. I worked with Private Cooper's unit. He asked me to check on you when I rotated in. Said you and your kids were special." My throat tightened. That's very kind." He wasn't wrong. "I've read the reports about this city, about the survivors. You've done remarkable work rebuilding, teaching your children, contributing to the community. I'm just trying to survive." "No," he said gently. "You're doing more than that. You're showing people how to live with difficult truths, how to teach the next generation differently. That's important work." He handed me an envelope. "Cooper wanted you to have this. He's getting married next month, to his high school sweetheart. He wanted to invite you, though I know you can't travel yet." I opened the envelope. Inside, a wedding invitation, and a photograph of Will with a pretty blonde woman, both of them smiling like they'd never known war. "Tell him congratulations," I said, "and tell him thank you for everything." "I will." December 31st, 1946, New Year's Eve. We stood in the square with hundreds of others, waiting for midnight. The Americans had set up speakers to broadcast the countdown from their base. Elsa and Klaus were bundled in coats, real coats, not rags, provided by the relief organizations. They bounced with excitement, sugar high from the cookies we'd baked that afternoon with real butter and sugar. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. I thought about the year behind us. The revelations, the guilt, the slow, painful process of learning to live with what we'd done and what had been done to us. 7, 6, 5. I thought about Will Cooper, married now, building a life in Pennsylvania, about the letters we exchanged monthly, about the friendship that had grown from ice cream and impossible circumstances. 4, 3, 2. I thought about my children, about the people they were becoming, thoughtful, questioning, kind. 1. Happy New Year! The crowd erupted in cheers. Fireworks exploded over the city. Not bombs, not destruction, but celebration. Light in the darkness. Klaus tugged my hand. "Mutti, what's your New Year's wish?" I looked down at him, at Elsa, at their faces, illuminated by fireworks and hope. "I wish for you both to grow up in a world where you never have to choose between conscience and survival," I said. "Where telling the truth doesn't get you killed. Where people are judged by their character, not their race or religion or nationality. That's a big wish," Elsa said seriously. "Yes, but worth wishing for. Will it come true? I don't know. But we can try to make it true. All of us, together." She nodded, satisfied, and turned back to watch the fireworks. I stood there, holding my children's hands, and made a different wish. A private one. I wished for forgiveness. Not from others. I didn't deserve that yet. Might never deserve it. But from myself. Forgiveness for being human. For being scared. For believing lies because the truth was too terrifying to face. And forgiveness for surviving when so many others didn't. I didn't know if I'd ever fully achieve that forgiveness, but standing there, with my children alive and healthy, with a future that seemed possible again, I thought maybe I could try. Maybe that was enough. January 15th, 1947. My diary entry. 2 years ago, I was a woman who believed in final victory, who saluted a flag and sang songs, and trusted that our leaders knew best. 1 year ago, I was a woman drowning in guilt and revelation, learning that everything I'd believed was a lie, trying to reconcile the comfortable citizen I'd been with the horrors that had been committed in my name. Today, I am a woman trying to be better. I teach my children to question, to think critically, to treat every person as human, regardless of who they are or where they come from. I tell them the truth about what happened, age-appropriate truth, but truth nonetheless. I correspond with an American soldier who showed me that enemies can become friends, that humanity transcends nationality. I volunteer at the school, teaching other children. I work on rebuilding crews, moving rubble, planting gardens. I go to the psychiatrist monthly and work through my guilt and trauma. I do not forgive myself. Perhaps I never will. But I'm learning to live with what I know. To carry the weight without letting it crush me. Is it enough? Probably not. Can I do more? Probably yes, but I'm trying. Every day I'm trying, and perhaps that's all any of us can do. Acknowledge what happened, learn from it, and commit to doing better, not for ourselves, for the children, for the future, for the slim hope that maybe, just maybe, we can build something better from these ruins. Ernst, if you're out there somewhere, I hope you'd be proud of the children. They're strong and kind and brave. They ask questions I can't answer. They challenge me to be better. They give me hope. And in a world like this, hope is revolution. April 24th, 1950. 5 years after the Americans arrived. Würzburg had been rebuilt. Not restored. You couldn't restore what had been destroyed, but rebuilt. New buildings rose from the rubble. The cathedral was under reconstruction. Streets were paved. Shops were open. We had a real house now. 3 rooms and a kitchen. Glass in the windows. A roof that didn't leak. Elsa was 11. Klaus was 9. They went to school every day. Real school, with books and desks and teachers who taught them to think, not obey. I worked as a teacher now myself, teaching German literature and history, the real history, the uncomfortable history, the history that made people flinch but needed to be told. And every month, without fail, a letter arrived from Pennsylvania. Will had 2 children now, a boy and a girl. He sent photographs. They looked like him, freckled and smiling, full of possibility. We'd been corresponding for 5 years. In that time, we'd become something strange and unprecedented. Genuine friends, German and American, former enemies, connected by ice cream and honesty and the shared belief that people could be better than their worst moments. Mutti! Klaus burst through the door, waving a paper. I got an A on my history essay. That's wonderful. What was it about? Reconstruction. How Germany is being rebuilt. How we're learning democracy. Can I read it? He handed it over proudly. I read his careful handwriting, his thoughtful analysis, his cautious optimism about the future. At the end, he'd written, My mother says we must never forget what happened, but we also can't let the past destroy the future. We must remember and build. That's hard, but it's necessary. I pulled him into a hug. I'm proud of you, I whispered. Because of the A? Because of what you wrote. Because you understand. That evening I wrote another letter to Will. Dear Will, 5 years. Can you believe it? 5 years since you gave my children ice cream and changed everything. Würzburg is beautiful again. Different than it was, but beautiful. We've learned to live with the scars, to build around them rather than pretending they don't exist. The children are thriving. Elsa wants to be a teacher. Klaus wants to be an engineer. They're good kids, kind kids. They ask hard questions and don't accept easy answers. I think about the woman I was when you arrived. The woman holding a rifle, ready to do the unthinkable because propaganda had convinced her that mercy was weakness and enemies were monsters. You taught me, taught all of us, that enemies are just people on the other side of an invisible line, that compassion is strength, that rebuilding is braver than revenge. I'll never be able to repay that debt, but I can pay it forward. Every day in my classroom, I teach the next generation to question, to think, to resist the easy lies of nationalism and hatred. It's not enough. It'll never be enough to balance the scales for what was done, but it's something. Thank you, Will, for the ice cream, for the letters, for showing me that people can change, that nations can change, that the future doesn't have to repeat the past. Your friend, always. Margaret P.S. The children send their love. Elsa wants to know if your daughter likes dolls. Klaus wants to know if your son likes toy cars. They're already planning pen pal letters. I sealed the letter, addressed it carefully, and set it by the door for posting. Then I went to tuck in the children. Klaus was already asleep, clutching the toy car Will had made him 5 years ago. Elsa was reading by flashlight, a book about American history, borrowed from the library. Bedtime, sweetheart. Just one more chapter? One more. Then lights out. She read while I sat on the edge of her bed. When she finished, she closed the book and looked at me seriously. Mutti, do you think we'll ever get to visit America? Meet Will and his family? Maybe. Someday, when we save enough money. I like that. I want to thank him for helping us. You can tell him in your letters. It's not the same. She paused. Muti, are we good people now? The question. The eternal question. We're trying to be, I said. That's all anyone can do. But we were bad people. Before, right? We were people who made bad choices. Or who didn't make choices when we should have. That's different from being bad people. How? Bad people don't learn. Don't change. Don't try to be better. We're trying. That's what matters. She thought about this. Okay. I kissed her forehead. Sleep now. We have a big day tomorrow. What's tomorrow? The memorial service. For everyone who died in the war. 5 years after it ended. Will it be sad? Yes. But it's important to remember. To honor them. To promise we'll do better. She nodded, already drifting off. I turned out the light and stood in the doorway, watching my children sleep. 5 years ago, I'd been ready to end their lives rather than let them meet American soldiers. Now they were planning pen pal letters to American children. The transformation wasn't complete. Might never be complete. The guilt was still there. The knowledge of what had been done in Germany's name, in my name, still haunted my dreams. But there was also hope. And friendship. And the slow, patient work of building something better from the ruins. The war had destroyed cities, but it had also destroyed lies. And from those destroyed lies, truth could grow. Hard truth. Uncomfortable truth. Truth that demanded we look at ourselves and admit what we'd been complicit in, but also truth that allowed for change. For growth. For the possibility that people could be better than their worst moments. I closed the children's door and went to my own room. On the nightstand, Ernst's photograph. He'd been officially declared dead in 1947. Missing in action. Presumed killed at Stalingrad. I picked up the photograph and studied his face. Young. Earnest. Believing he was fighting for something noble. I'm teaching them differently, I told him. Teaching them to question. To think. To never blindly follow. I hope you'd approve. I hope you'd understand. The photograph didn't answer. It never did. I set it back down and turned out the light. Tomorrow I would attend the memorial service. I would honor the dead. I would promise. Again. To do better. And then I would go home to my children. I would help them write letters to their American pen pals. I would teach them that enemies can become friends, that nations can change, that hope is always possible. It wasn't redemption. Not yet. Maybe never. But it was a start. And sometimes a start is everything. The end. If this story moved you, changed how you think, or made you consider how easily propaganda shapes our reality, I need you to do something right now. Subscribe. Like. Comment below with one thing you learned from Margaret's story. Because her story isn't just about World War II. It's about how ordinary people become complicit in extraordinary evil. It's about how enemies are just people. It's about how truth, real truth, is the hardest thing to face and the most important thing to teach. My name is Margaret Hoffman. I was 32 years old when the Americans arrived. I had 2 children, Elsa, 6, and Klaus, 4. My husband Ernst had been gone since Stalingrad, missing in action, the telegram said in February 1943. Missing. As if he'd wandered off during a Sunday walk and would return with wildflowers and apologies. I kept his photograph on the mantelpiece. Kept, past tense, because by April 1945, there was no mantelpiece. There was no parlor. There were 3 interior walls still standing, a staircase that led to nothing, and the corner of the cellar where we slept on blankets that smelled like mildew and fear. March 16th, 1945. My diary, what's left of it. The bombs came again last night. Elsa wet herself. Klaus won't stop asking about his father. I told him Papa is fighting for our future. God forgive me for lying to a child. Würzburg had been beautiful once. A Baroque jewel on the main river. Churches with golden domes. The residence palace where I'd taken the children to see the frescoes before the war. On March 16, 1945, the British Royal Air Force sent 225 Lancaster bombers. 17 minutes. That's how long it took to turn 8 centuries of history into rubble. Incendiary bombs, phosphorus and petroleum jelly, designed not just to destroy, but to burn. 5,000 people died that night. 90% of the city center was gone by morning. We survived because I'd learned to listen. When the sirens started at 9:37 p.m., I didn't hesitate. I grabbed both children. Elsa still in her nightgown. Klaus clutching his wooden horse, and we ran to the public shelter beneath St. Kilian's Cathedral. 300 of us packed into a space meant for 100. The air was thick with body heat and terror. A woman next to me prayed the rosary so fast the words blurred into a hum. The bombs sounded like the earth splitting open. Each impact shook dust from the ceiling. Klaus buried his face in my chest. I sang to him, Guten Abend, Gute Nacht, but my voice shook so badly I couldn't finish the verse. When we emerged at dawn, St. Kilian's was a skeleton. The streets were rivers of flame. Bodies lay in positions that didn't make sense. A woman's hand reaching out from beneath a collapsed wall. A child's shoe on a windowsill 3 stories up. No child attached. I held Elsa's and Klaus's hands so tightly I left bruises. We walked through smoke so thick I tied a wet cloth over their faces. My lungs burned. My eyes streamed. I counted my steps to keep from screaming. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're alive. 5, 6, 7, 8. We're still walking. 9, 10, 11, 12. Don't look at the bodies. Our street, Semmelstrasse, was unrecognizable. The bakery where Herr Müller used to slip Klaus an extra roll. Gone. The apartment building where Frau Schneider taught piano. A mountain of bricks. Our house. Half standing. Like someone had taken a knife and cut it down the middle. But we had 3 walls. We had a corner of the cellar. We had each other. That was March. By April, we'd learned the new rules of survival. Rule 1. Stay invisible. The SS still patrolled the ruins, looking for deserters, defeatists, anyone who'd stopped believing in the Endsieg, the final victory. Frau Werner, 2 streets over, was hanged from a lamppost for saying the war was lost. They left her body there for 3 days as a warning. She was 64 years old. Rule 2. Trust no one. Your neighbor might report you for hoarding food. The Hitler Youth, boys Klaus's age, roamed the streets with rifles bigger than they were, eyes bright with fanaticism or terror, sometimes both. Rule 3. Ration everything. We had 6 potatoes left. A tin of condensed milk I'd been saving since 1943. Half a loaf of black bread so hard I had to soak it in water before the children could chew it. There was no meat, no butter, no sugar. The ration cards were worthless. The shops had nothing to sell. Rule 4. Don't think about tomorrow. Tomorrow was an enemy. Tomorrow meant the front line was closer. Tomorrow meant the Volkssturm, the people's militia, would conscript old men and boys to die defending ruins no one cared about. Tomorrow meant decisions I wasn't ready to make. I boiled the potatoes in rainwater I'd collected in a bucket. No salt. No fat. Just potatoes and water, and the sound of artillery getting louder every day. Mutti, what's that noise? Elsa asked. She was sitting on the floor, playing with a doll whose head had been cracked in the bombing. I'd tied a scrap of cloth around it like a bandage. Thunder, I said. It doesn't sound like thunder. She was right. It didn't. It sounded like the end of the world, which is exactly what it was. The Americans were coming from the west, the Red Army from the east. Germany was being crushed between 2 hammers, and we were the metal on the anvil. The radio, when we could get it to work on the car battery I'd scavenged, still broadcast Goebbels' speeches. Victory is certain. The Führer has secret weapons. The enemy will break against our iron will. I turned it off. Klaus was too young to understand, but Elsa was starting to ask questions. Mutti, if we're winning, why are there no soldiers left? Mutti, why did Frau Werner get hanged? Mutti, is Papa really coming home? I didn't have answers. I had 3 potatoes and a daughter who was starting to understand that everything we'd been told was a lie. April 23rd, 1945. Evening. The artillery was so close I could feel it in my teeth. I made the children sleep in the cellar, wrapped in every blanket we had. I sat on the stairs with Ernst's old hunting rifle across my lap. It had 1 bullet left. I'd been saving it. Not for the Americans. For Klaus and Elsa. If the Red Army came first. I'd heard the stories. Everyone had. The refugees from the east. Women who'd walked hundreds of miles through snow. Their eyes dead, their voices flat. They told us what the Soviets did. What they did to girls, to women, to anyone German. I'd made a decision. If I heard Russian voices, I would take my children down to the cellar, hold them close, and I couldn't finish the thought, but the rifle was loaded. And I knew which end to put in my mouth if I had to do it fast. That's what propaganda does. It doesn't just lie to you. It crawls inside your brain and builds a world where shooting your own children feels like mercy. I sat on those stairs all night, rifle in my hands, listening to the war get closer. April 24th, 1945. Morning. The artillery stopped. That was the first sign. For 3 days the horizon had thundered. Now, silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I climbed out of the cellar. The sky was pale gray, the color of dirty water. Smoke rose from the west, the direction of the American advance. I could smell it. Burning wood, diesel fuel, something chemical I couldn't identify. And then I heard it. Engines. Not panzers. I knew that sound, the grinding roar of German armor. These were different. Smoother, heavier, multiple vehicles moving in formation. I ran back to the cellar. Elsa, Klaus, stay here. Don't make a sound. Mutti, not a sound. I covered them with blankets, kissed their foreheads, and climbed back up. My hands were shaking. The rifle felt impossibly heavy. The engines were louder now. Close. I crept to the front of the house, the part that was still standing, and peered through a gap in the wall. Tanks. 4 of them. M4 Shermans. I'd seen enough newsreels to recognize them. American. The white star painted on the hull, stark against the olive drab paint. They moved slowly, cautiously, turrets swiveling. Behind them, trucks, jeeps, soldiers on foot, rifles raised, moving from building to building. They were here. My heart hammered so hard I thought I'd faint. 7 years of propaganda played in my head like a film reel. The Americans are savages. They'll rape and murder. They'll burn what's left. They're coming to exterminate us. I'd believed it. God help me. I'd believed every word. I pressed myself against the wall, rifle clutched to my chest, and prayed they wouldn't find us. The first American I saw was a boy. Not a man. A boy. 18, maybe 19, with a face full of freckles and a helmet that looked too big for his head. He came around the corner of the ruined building across the street, rifle at the ready, and froze when he saw me. We stared at each other. He didn't shoot. He didn't scream. He just looked at me. A woman in a torn dress, covered in dust, holding a rifle like she had any idea how to use it. "Ma'am," he said. His voice cracked. "Ma'am, do you speak English?" I didn't move. Couldn't move. He lowered his rifle slowly, both hands visible. "I'm not gonna hurt you, okay? Not gonna hurt you." Behind him, another soldier appeared. Older. Harder. He barked something in English I didn't understand. The boy responded, gestured to me. The older soldier's expression didn't change. "Tell her to drop the weapon," the older soldier said. His German was broken but clear enough. "Waffe fallen lassen." I dropped the rifle. It clattered on the stones. "Kinder?" the older soldier asked. "Children?" I didn't answer. Didn't breathe. He said something to the boy in English. The boy nodded, slung his rifle over his shoulder, and disappeared into one of the trucks. The older soldier kept his eyes on me. Not threatening, just watching, like he'd done this before, like he knew exactly what I was thinking. "We're not going to hurt you," he said in his broken German. "You understand? Nicht toten." The boy returned carrying a cardboard box. He set it down on the street and opened it. I smelled it before I saw it. Chocolate, canned meat, white bread. Actual white bread. Not the sawdust loaves we'd been choking down. And something else. Something I hadn't seen in 4 years. Oranges. The boy picked one up and held it out to me. "For your kids," he said. "For Kinder." I didn't take it. I stood there, frozen, while every warning, every piece of propaganda, every nightmare scenario played in my head. "It's a trick. They're luring you out. They'll find the children and—" "Ma'am," the boy said. His eyes were kind, unbearably kind. "Please, it's okay." I took the orange. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The boy smiled, a real smile, shy and nervous, and pulled out 2 chocolate bars. 2 kids, right? I got 2 sisters back home. About the same age, I bet. He set the chocolate bars on top of the box and stepped back, hands visible, non-threatening. The older soldier said something in English. They both turned and walked away, just like that. No demands, no threats, no violence. I stood in the ruins of my house, holding an orange and 2 chocolate bars, while American soldiers disappeared down the street to clear the next block. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes? Hours? Time had stopped meaning anything. Finally, I went back to the cellar. "Moody?" Elsa's voice was small, scared. "It's safe," I heard myself say. They're gone." I unwrapped one of the chocolate bars and broke it in half. Elsa and Klaus stared at it like it was magic. "Is it real?" Klaus whispered. "Yes." They ate slowly, reverently, licking every smear of chocolate from their fingers. I peeled the orange. The smell was so strong it made me dizzy, and divided it between them. Elsa looked up at me, juice running down her chin, and asked the question I'd been afraid to answer. "Moody, are the Americans good?" I didn't know what to say. April 25th, 1945. The Americans set up a command post in the ruins of the rat house, the town hall. They brought trucks full of supplies, food, medicine, tents. They started clearing rubble, marking safe zones, distributing rations. I watched from a distance. So did everyone else. The survivors, maybe 2,000 people left in a city that once held 100,000, crept out of cellars and ruins like ghosts. We moved in clusters, afraid to be alone, afraid to trust, afraid of everything. The Americans didn't force us. They just worked. They set up field kitchens and started cooking. The smell of meat frying drifted through the rubble. Real meat. My stomach clenched so hard I doubled over. By afternoon, there was a line at the field kitchen. 100 people. Maybe more. Clutching buckets and pots and anything that could hold food. I joined them, holding Klaus's hand. Elsa clung to my skirt. An American soldier. Different from the freckled boy, this one was black, which I'd never seen in person before. Ladled stew into my pot. He smiled at Klaus. "Hey there, buddy." Klaus hid behind my leg. The soldier laughed, not mocking, just warm, and pulled something from his pocket, a piece of hard candy. He held it out. "For Dick," he said. "For you." Klaus looked up at me. I nodded. He took the candy and whispered, "Danke. You're welcome, pal." We ate the stew sitting on a pile of bricks that used to be someone's home. It was thin, mostly broth and vegetables, but it was hot, and there was meat in it. And I couldn't remember the last time I'd tasted something that wasn't potatoes or black bread. Elsa ate 3 helpings. Klaus fell asleep with the candy still in his mouth. That night in the cellar, I wrote in my diary, "The Americans gave us food." They smiled at the children. One of them spoke to Klaus like he was a person, not a thing to be destroyed. I don't understand. We were told they were monsters. April 26th, 1945. Late morning. I was hanging laundry. Rags, really, but they needed washing. On a rope I'd strung between 2 broken walls when I heard the Jeep. Americans. 3 of them. The freckled boy from 2 days ago was driving. He parked in the street and waved. "Morning, ma'am." I froze. The wet rag slipped from my hands. He hopped out of the Jeep, smiling that same nervous, kind smile. The other 2 soldiers stayed in the vehicle, but they were smiling too. One of them was holding something. A wooden crate. We thought your kids might like this," the freckled boy said. He gestured, and the other soldier lifted the crate out of the Jeep. They carried it over and set it down in front of me. Inside the crate, canned milk, crackers, chocolate, soap. Actual soap, not the caustic lye bars we'd been using. And wrapped in cloth at the bottom, a small American flag and 2 tiny toy soldiers. For Klaus. "The flag's from Corporal Davies," the freckled boy said, pointing to one of the other soldiers. "He's got a son about your boy's age. Thought maybe it'd be something to play with." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely. The boy misread my silence. "If it's not okay, we can take it back. We just thought..." "Danke," I whispered. "Thank you." His face lit up. "You're welcome, ma'am. You're real welcome." They climbed back into the Jeep and drove away, leaving me standing there with a crate full of gifts I didn't know how to process. Elsa appeared from the cellar. "Mutti, what is it?" "Gifts," I said. "The Americans. They brought gifts." She looked at me, her 6-year-old face serious beyond her years. Are they still the bad people? I had no answer. April 28th, 1945, mid-afternoon. The Americans set up a medical station in what used to be a school. I'd been avoiding it. Klaus had a cough that wouldn't go away, but I was afraid. Afraid of what they'd do if we went inside. Afraid they'd take him away. Afraid of everything the propaganda had planted in my mind. But the cough was getting worse. At night, I could hear fluid in his lungs. Elsa had started coughing too. I had no choice. I wrapped both children in blankets and walked to the school. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd vomit. At the entrance, an American soldier, a medic, judging by the Red Cross on his armband, smiled at us. "Come on in, ma'am. We'll take good care of them." Inside, organized chaos. Wounded German soldiers lay on stretchers next to American soldiers. A German doctor worked alongside American medics. No one was screaming. No one was being executed. They were just helping people. A female American medic, I hadn't known they had women in their army, knelt down in front of Klaus. "Hey, sweetie, what's your name?" He didn't answer, just coughed. She listened to his chest with a stethoscope, her face calm and professional. Then Elsa's. "Bronchitis," she said to me in passable German. "Both of them. Not pneumonia yet, but it will be if we don't treat it. I'm going to give them sulfa drugs and some cough syrup. You need to make sure they take it twice a day. Can you do that?" I nodded, mute. She handed me 2 bottles of pills, a bottle of thick red syrup, and a piece of paper with instructions written in careful German. "Bring them back in 3 days so I can check their lungs." And here, she pulled out 2 lollipops. For being brave, Elsa and Klaus took the lollipops with wide eyes. "Danke," I managed. "Bitte schön. You're welcome." As we left, I heard her speaking to another medic in English. "God, these kids are malnourished. How long has this been going on?" "Years," the other medic said. "Since 43 at least. The blockade starved them before we ever got here. I walked home in a daze. The medicine bottles felt impossibly heavy in my hands." May 1st, 1945. The war wasn't over yet. Berlin was still fighting. Hitler was still alive, or so we were told. The radio broadcast increasingly frantic speeches about miracle weapons and final victories. But no one was listening anymore. The Americans controlled the city. The supplies kept coming. The field kitchens kept serving food. And the children started laughing again. I'd forgotten what that sounded like. Laughter. Klaus and Elsa played in the ruins with other children, their bellies full for the first time in years, their coughs fading. They traded their toy soldiers with American GIs who sat on piles of rubble and taught them English phrases. "Thank you. You're welcome. How are you?" I watched from a distance, arms wrapped around myself, trying to reconcile the world I'd been told to fear with the world I was living in. One afternoon, the freckled boy, his name was Private Cooper, I'd learned, parked his Jeep outside our ruined house again. This time, he was alone. He waved. "Afternoon, ma'am. Your kids around?" "In the back," I said. My English was broken, learned from school before the war, playing. "Mind if I give them something?" I tensed. "What?" He reached into the Jeep and pulled out a metal container. Cold air wafted from it, and I realized with shock that it was insulated with ice. "Ice cream," he said, grinning. "We got a shipment yesterday. I thought the kids might like some ice cream." I hadn't seen ice cream since 1939. Klaus and Elsa appeared, drawn by the sound of voices. Their eyes went wide when they saw Private Cooper. "Hey, kiddos! You ever had ice cream?" They shook their heads. "Well, today's your lucky day." He pulled out 3 small paper containers and 3 wooden spoons. Vanilla ice cream, pale and perfect, already starting to melt in the April warmth. He handed one to Elsa, one to Klaus, and one to me. "Can't let the kids have all the fun," he said with a wink. Elsa took a tentative bite. Her face transformed, eyes wide, mouth open in shock and delight. "Mutti," she gasped. "Mutti, it's... She couldn't find the words. She just ate, spoonful after spoonful, ice cream dripping down her chin. Klaus devoured his in seconds and looked up at Private Cooper with desperate hope. "More?" Cooper laughed. "Sorry, buddy, that's all I got today, but I'll bring more next time, okay?" "Promise." He climbed back into his Jeep, waved goodbye, and drove off. I stood there, holding my untouched ice cream, watching my children laugh and lick their spoons and beg for more, and then it hit me, all of it. The propaganda, the lies, the years of fear, the rifle loaded with one bullet, the decision I'd been ready to make in the cellar if the wrong army arrived. These men, these boys from across an ocean, had brought my children ice cream. They'd given us food when we were starving, medicine when we were sick, kindness when we expected annihilation, and I'd been ready to shoot my own children rather than let them meet an American soldier. My hand started shaking. The ice cream container slipped. I caught it, but barely. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. My vision tunneled. "Moody?" Elsa's voice, far away. "Moody, what's wrong?" I couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. The world tilted. I sat down hard on the rubble, ice cream forgotten, and put my head between my knees. A panic attack. That's what the American medic would call it later. A complete psychological break as 7 years of propaganda collided with the reality of a freckled boy handing ice cream to children. Elsa and Klaus huddled around me, scared and confused. I pulled them close, gasping, crying, holding them so tightly they squeaked in protest. "I'm sorry," I whispered into their hair. "I'm so sorry." For what? I couldn't say. For believing the lies? For almost believing them enough to... I couldn't finish the thought. Klaus patted my head clumsily. "It's okay, Moody. Don't cry." The ice cream was really good, and somehow, that made it worse. May 2nd, 1945, evening. I couldn't sleep. I lay in the cellar, listening to the children breathe, and stared at the dark ceiling. The rifle was gone. I'd thrown it into the main river that afternoon, watched it sink into the brown water, and felt nothing. Relief? Shame? I didn't know anymore. My diary entry from that night. I don't know who I am anymore. I was a good German wife. I believed what I was told. I raised my children to salute the flag and sing the songs and trust that our leaders would protect us. But our leaders are gone, or dead, or fleeing, and the enemy, the Americans we were told would destroy us, are keeping us alive. Private Cooper gave my children ice cream today. Ice cream. And I had a panic attack because I suddenly understood what I'd been willing to do. What I'd been ready to do. Ernst, if you're alive somewhere, if you ever come home, how do I explain this to you? How do I explain that the Americans saved us while our own leaders left us to die? How do I explain that your children are alive because the enemy showed them more compassion than the fatherland ever did? I closed the diary and held it against my chest. Outside, somewhere in the ruins, an American soldier was singing. A slow, melancholy tune I didn't recognize. Other voices joined in. Harmony, laughter, the sounds of young men far from home, missing their families, doing their duty in the wreckage of someone else's country. I thought about Private Cooper, about the black soldier who'd given Klaus candy, about the female medic who'd treated my children with gentle efficiency, about all the men and women who'd crossed an ocean to fight people they'd never met, and who'd responded to those people's suffering with ice cream and chocolate and medicine. I thought about the propaganda that had poisoned my mind so thoroughly I'd been ready to kill my own children, rather than let them meet these people, and I realized the war wasn't just out there, on battlefields and in bombed cities. The war was in here, in my head, in the place where fear and lies had built a fortress that was only now beginning to crumble. May 8th, 1945. The radio crackled to life at 2:41 a.m. I was awake. I was always awake now, it seemed, and heard the announcement in real time. Germany had surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt empty. By morning, everyone knew. The Americans put up loudspeakers in the central square and played the news in German and English. People gathered in small clusters, faces blank, too exhausted for emotion. Private Cooper found me in the crowd. He looked different, older somehow, even though only 2 weeks had passed. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "it's over. Yes, I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but things are going to get better. We're going to help you rebuild. Food, medicine, schools, all of it. That's a promise." I looked at him. this boy with freckles and kind eyes who'd brought my children ice cream, and asked the question that had been burning in my mind for days. Why? He blinked. Why what? Why are you helping us? We're the enemy. We did terrible things. The camps, the invasions, all of it. Why aren't you punishing us? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Because you're people, ma'am. You and your kids, you're just people. And people deserve help. But I know what your government did. We all know. But that doesn't mean you deserve to starve. It doesn't mean your kids deserve to die of bronchitis in a cellar. He paused, looking out over the ruins. My grandfather came from Germany, Stuttgart. Came to America in 1910. He still speaks German at home, makes schnitzel on Sundays, the whole thing. He cried when we got our deployment orders. Not because he's a Nazi, God no, but because he knows there are people here who are just like him, just trying to survive. He turned back to me. So that's why. Because if the situation was reversed, if my mom and my sisters were living in ruins, I'd hope someone would give them ice cream too. I started crying. Not the gasping panic of 2 days ago, but quiet tears that ran down my face unchecked. Thank you, I whispered. You're welcome, ma'am. He tipped his helmet, an oddly formal gesture in the middle of the apocalypse, and walked away. The war was over, but for me, a different war was just beginning. The war to understand how I'd been so thoroughly deceived. How I'd believed that the people bringing food to my starving children were monsters, while the people who'd left us to die in the rubble were heroes. The war to forgive myself for what I'd almost done. The war to explain to Elsa and Klaus, when they were old enough to understand, that their mother had once held a loaded rifle and contemplated the unthinkable because she'd believed a lie. That war would take years, maybe a lifetime. But on May 8th, 1945, in the ruins of Würzburg, surrounded by the sounds of reconstruction and the smell of American field kitchens cooking dinner, I made a decision. I would tell the truth. Not the propaganda. Not the lies we'd been fed for 12 years, but the truth. The truth about the freckled boy who brought ice cream. The truth about the black soldier who gave my son candy. The truth about the female medic who saved my children's lives. The truth about the ordinary people who crossed an ocean and showed compassion when they could have shown cruelty. Because that truth, that simple, devastating truth, was the only weapon I had left against the lies. And maybe, just maybe, if enough of us told the truth, the next generation wouldn't have to learn it the way I did. Standing in the ruins of everything we'd believed, holding melted ice cream, while our children laughed for the first time in years.